Thank you for joining me today for Speaking of Gas. And I intend for this to be a weekly broadcast for people who own oil and gas rights in Pennsylvania. It'll be a weekly look at what matters to you. And it's brought to you by the GasWellGuru, and who is always the landowner's advocate. This webcast is recorded, and it may be available after. That remains to be seen. Attendees may not record or share this material. So I'm going to jump right in. I have two topics for today. And once a month, there are production reports that are published by DEP. And so probably one week each month, I will take a look at that month's production reports, not necessarily as soon as they come out, generally waiting a little bit because sometimes the reports aren't complete when they're first issued. A few years ago, a law was passed that required companies to report unconventional wells, and they have to report those yearly. In the beginning, it was every 6 months, but about 2015, they switched to monthly. So it's for 2 preceding months back that the information is reported. Conventional wells are also reported, but they have a 5-year confidentiality period, and then they're required to report yearly, not monthly. And at this point, the focus of these webcasts will be on the unconventional activity and production. So I'm going to show you this, this month's report, and we're looking at a compilation of the top 20 producing wells in the state of Pennsylvania. And I will blow this up, enlarge it as we're looking at it so that you can see what I'm actually talking about. So something that you may not realize is how much activity there actually is in the state. I know when I talk about this, people are always surprised. There are 12,000, as of this month, 12,809 active unconventional wells. So these are wells that have been spud, the drilling has been started, or a permit was issued, or they're in production. And actually 11,541 of those are producing as of the July report. And that's what we're looking at, is July. I did incorrectly say in the advertisement for this event that it was August. I just was off a month. For total production in the state, companies have produced in July 631 BCF of gas. And again, this is according to the report compiled here. I will say about this report that they are required to report it, but there is no oversight. There's nothing to say that what they've reported is correct or will match your royalty check. They can change it at any time, and they do. So the report is good for the day that it's downloaded and printed. And for this, I did do that yesterday. So any changes that have been made, the report comes out on the 15th of the month. Any changes that have been made since the 15th are included here. The report has been coming out in this format now since I think about 2010. And just in the last few months, they changed the format. So the columns had remained the same all those years, and recently they changed it. I want to say there probably are some improvements in it. They did, as far as I can tell, go back and change prior reports. So if you pull off a report for any period that it was reported, it should be updated in this format so you're not comparing apples to oranges as far as the columns. If you followed these right along, an obvious change right in the beginning is the county and municipality are in the first two columns, and they were in a different place prior to that. And they moved the spud date, and they added a few columns. So the report I have up here, it shows the 20 top wells for the state. And I have edited this so that it's not showing all the columns. There are many, many more, but all of them aren't really relevant for the purposes of this, looking at this report. So you've got the county, and let's see, I will blow this up so it's a little easier to see. You've got the county and the municipality, and then the permit number. The permit number, which is now required to appear on your checks, is actually an abbreviated part of the API number for oil and gas wells. That's a unique number across the country that identifies a well. And actually the full API number, if you can see my cursor here, this is 059 is the county in Pennsylvania, 28170 is the specific well. And the API number will have a 37 in front of this, and that represents Pennsylvania. And then there are 4 additional spaces after, and those are for deviations from that main wellbore. And there are a few of those in the state, not too many. So at this point, you're not seeing any of those in this. The next, you have the name of the well. And I am going to look in more detail at this Pale Ale 10H because it's the top well reported for July. And you'll notice that there are several Pale Ale wells down through here. So you'll expect that those wells will all be on the same pad, the Pale Ale pad. And this is one well, the 10H, with its own individual production. This column has the start date, and what's significant with this one, I mean, that's July, all these wells, the production is July. But if you're doing a report for one individual well, cumulative production, you can use this column as a sort feature to put your spreadsheet in order. The client is the operator. Here we have EQT, Chesapeake, Coterra, which used to be Cabot. And that's all that shows in the top 10 this month. But of course, we have a number of other wells throughout the state. I can't tell you the number of companies. That might be an interesting thing to look at for another week. These all show active status, obviously, because they are, these top wells are drilled and in production. The next column is the gas quantity, and this is reported in MCF. So if you're receiving royalties, you are paid on the MCF, and that is what this number represents. So if that number is multiplied by the price of gas, then that would be the value of it. And of course, then you've got to multiply that by your fractional interest to come up with what you're paid. And then the next one is the gas operating days. So if a well is produced gas in all 31 days of the month like this, then you've got the full month. Now, if you skip down here to the barley wine 12H, that was 19 days of production. So and that well was spud in April of last year. It may be that it just came on production in July and produced for the last 19 days, possibly. The same with the Mowry 25HC. And I actually think that Mowry well is very recent. You see that the spud date, the date they began operations there, drilling, was January 1st of this year. So you can have less than a full month in days if it's the first month of production, if they shut it down for maintenance, or if they shut it in for a period of time. So this is a good place to look if you stop receiving royalty checks to see if the well is producing, or possibly if the well is shut in, if you're following along with wells that you're part of. Now this column is MMCF per day. And that is one that I insert. Every time I download a production report, I insert this column and do the calculations so that I can look at what rate that well is producing. Saying that it produced X number of MCF in 31 days really doesn't compare for me what the rate of production is. And this is typically the number that you hear companies talk about when they say that, particularly initial production, publicly traded companies like to say that the Pale Ale 8 came on and produced 38 million cubic feet of gas in the first 24 hours or whatever, or so many days. So this is how you compare apples to apples with the wells. And the highest producing well is producing 39 million cubic feet a day. To put that number in perspective, when this first began, and this Pale Ale is a Marcellus well, because I'll show you some other information, but when this began, and now we're going back 15 years to the first, and a little bit longer, 15, 19 years for first wells. And they were coming in at numbers that were like, 4 million a day was a pretty good well. 8 million a day was a barn burner. But you saw a lot of wells at 1 and 2 million a day. So this is pretty astounding production that they're getting now. And some of it has to do with the length of the laterals, and I'll talk about that. But also the improved technology. And I always say that's the good news and the bad news. They have this great production, and you see all these Pale Ale wells listed, and that's individual production on the pad for all those wells. But the bad news is also that, where you're waiting for a well to be drilled because you've signed the lease, or you're waiting to be leased, that wait can be longer. It's just not like it was when the frenzy was occurring. So they need pipeline for this. They need takeaway for all this gas. So these are like I said, the top 20 wells. And if you go back over here to the counties, we have Greene County in southwestern PA, Bradford, Wyoming, Susquehanna, and the Northeast. Wyoming County is kind of our little powerhouse, little tiny county in Pennsylvania, and they're producing a tremendous amount of gas there. Again, Greene, and you will see other counties from time to time in the top 20, but these all are some of the highest producing counties in the state. Okay. And now, there should be a place for you to enter questions. And if you can't find it on this one, I definitely need to know that before the next one. But I do have that box up now. Hopefully you can see it. If not, you'll have to write those down and send them after this one is over. I'm kind of ironing out the glitches. And for those of you that know me, you probably realize that a lot of things I do, I'm a one-woman show. So I don't have a producer for this, and it will hopefully get better with time. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to talk about is one specific well. And I'm going to share another report. And this is for that top well, which happens to be in southwest Pennsylvania. And let's see, the cumulative report. Okay, so this is a report that I put together for the Pale Ale 10H. And I guess the Pale Ale name has to do with a favorite beer as opposed to the landowner's name. But I guess those of you that have been in this long enough to know that they can name wells anything they want. And this particular pad, it's the Pale Ale. This is a Greene County, Jackson Township well, and it is the top well for July. EQT is the company, and some data on that well. The total vertical depth is 7,914 feet, and it produced 1,221,104 MCF in 31 days in July. And as you remember on the report, that was about 39 million cubic feet per day. The lateral length on this is 18,481 feet. And it produced 66 MCF per foot in July. A few months ago, or maybe last month's report, one of our members from the Pennsylvania Oil and Gas Landowner Alliance looked at this report and asked, is there any way to know how long the laterals are on each of these wells? And my answer to that was that is not part of these reports. You can find the information, but it's to date not in anything that's produced in a spreadsheet easily. But I did go back and compile data from 10 wells and shared that with our members. Now, I didn't share it on the Facebook page. I shared it with our members and figured out how much in that given month the wells produce per foot. And I think I also put some information out about the frac stages. But all of that is information that you've got to glean from reports, not readily available. And when you look at these laterals that are 18,000 foot now, 20,000 foot. Back when this began, it was very typical for a lateral to be maybe 3 to just over 5,000 feet. And fracked in 4, 12 stages. And now we're seeing wells that are fracked with over, in some cases, 40 stages. And I can't tell you the highest number exactly. So in this particular report, I mentioned about pulling a report for an individual well. So if you'll notice, the permit number is the same. The start date is the date that the production is for. So if you wanted to graph your production on your well and take a look at your own decline curve, how that well is producing, and maybe try to make some predictions, as dangerous as that is, into the future, you can create your own cumulative report and a graph to go with it, with an Excel spreadsheet. Now, but one thing important to know is if you're tracking the production from your wells yourself, and you're pulling that production off in each monthly report, pulling that off and adding it to the last report for the well is really not a good way to do that, because I mentioned they can change this data at any time. So there have been times when the production report has come out, and I mentioned that there are 12,000 wells, almost 13,000 this month. Well, if that report comes out and there's only 8,000 wells in the report, then you know that it's not complete. There's a lot missing. So if you want a report as of today for that well, you can do that. There's a way to do it on the DEP website, but it's only accurate if it's printed that day. And And so here it shows that the well was spud in February of 23. Production, it was first on the report, the February report, as an active well. And there's a comment saying it was spud, but the drilling not completed. And you see that till you get down to September of 2022. And if you look at the completion report, it's very possible that around that time, the well was maybe completed and fracked and then shut in until it would go into production. And that could be waiting for pipeline. And also a lot of companies let these wells set for a period of months before they begin producing for for engineering reasons on the well. So you get down to April of this year, and you see the first production, and it was 291,745 MCF, producing 9.72 million cubic feet a day. At that point, it was full 30 days of production, but for whatever reason, it wasn't anywhere near what it produced in July. So they may have had to do additional work on it, although it's produced pretty steady. That doesn't look like, except for maybe June, it was off one day. Maybe they just didn't have it turned on all the way. You're really not going to know. Is that well producing all it's capable of or not? The only one that knows that is the company. If you have a relationship with the company where sometimes they'll share that information, but otherwise it's not in any reports. So that's a look at one well and the kind of information that you can get off on an individual well. And each month after the reports come out, I am going to look at that month's production report, maybe not in as much detail, and then maybe look at one of the wells, whether it's a top one or another one within it. And certainly for anyone that's participating in these webinars, if you ever want to email me any suggestions about topics or things in particular, I'd be happy to take that. If you want individual information about your own wells, whatever, that's more of a personal consultation. Now going to the other, and I'm going to touch on this very lightly. I said that I was going to talk about the environmental justice policy, and this may be completely new to you, but I know just enough about this to be dangerous, I want to say. But as the membership director for POGLA, and I work on the newsletter, we received information from the Marcellus Shale Coalition that this had gone into effect on September 16th. It was part of House Bill 652, I believe, that was passed in 2022, that put into effect this environmental justice policy. And it has to do with establishing areas where there's an environmental burden possibly of concern. They're looking at the idea that a lot of times socially, economically disadvantaged people are more likely to be, I might not be choosing my words right, are disproportionately living in areas where there's an environmental burden, pollution, that kind of thing, and are stuck there. So they're looking at this when it comes to issuing permits for activities that might add to that burden. So the Marcellus Shale Coalition sent us this to say that unconventional wells are considered an environmental burden, and having them in the area you're in could cause what they would consider excessive burden in getting a permit issued, and what kind of environmental impact studies would have to be done. So they have asked us to actually make comments to comments on this policy. And the comment that they are actually looking for is to say that they would like, you would like, we would like unconventional wells deleted from the policy as causing an environmental burden. Now, if you remember POGLA, we published this and we published the link to it to make the comment. And what I would say about making those kinds of public comments is that, you know, sending in a form letter is not particularly effective, but reading up on it a little and making a statement, even if it's brief, can possibly be helpful. And we may have someone to speak on that topic for POGLA members, and POGLA is the oil and gas, Pennsylvania Oil and Gas Landowner Alliance. That's yet to be determined. So one thing that I will share with you, and I was aware of this with the Pioga Press magazine that I subscribe to, and that is a site where you can look at, let's see. I know I have it up here. No, I don't. Well, let me pull this up here. Okay. Okay, there we go. Where there's actually an interactive map that you can look at and kind of get a sense of what they're looking at. This is from the Penn Enviro screen that shows the areas where they consider there's an environmental burden. And you can see that if you look across here, and hopefully you're seeing my cursor, this is where the shale play is. These areas, southwestern PA, Western PA in particular, there's a very heavy concentration of conventional wells. And so as you can actually click on an area, and let's see, if I click right here, it tells me this is Middletown Township or municipality in Susquehanna County. And then you can look and see what the pollution burden is, and these are scores. The exposures and the environmental effects. And so in that township, conventional oil and gas wells, it has a score of 21 as environmental effect. Unconventional, 94. So could this be a problem if they wanted to get an additional permit in that township? Very possibly. So stay tuned on that. I will have the link to this map. I found it interesting to look around through here. You pull up the legend and it tells you what the scale is on the different colors on the map. So I think I said in the beginning when I started talking about this that I knew just enough about that to be dangerous, but it is a concern. And so if you want to see development continue, we need to follow this. We need to have input on it so that these drilling permits can move forward and not get bottled up for unnecessary reasons. And industry is saying that the regulations are and the criteria that they're using are a little unclear at this point. Okay, enough said there. Couple of things that I'll mention quickly. There are two bills in particular that we're following, the POGLA organization is. One is Senate Bill 654, which we are supporting. Farm Bureau is supporting it. We've been working together on that. Senator Bartolotta, and we thank her, introduced Senate Bill 654, and that did pass out of the Senate and over to the House now. So we're following that. We'll have action alerts for our members in POGLA. But that's the depletion allowance bill. I guess I need to make sure I go there. And if that passes, You're probably aware that you can take 15% deduction off the top of your royalties that you're paid when you do your federal return. That's a depletion allowance that's just a percentage. If you have that property as an investment and you're taking cost depletion, that's different. But Pennsylvania it currently does not allow you to take that on your Pennsylvania return. So this bill would allow you to take that deduction. The other bill is Senate Bill 831. It's still in the Senate. It was introduced by Senator Yaw, and this has to do with carbon capture projects. And a big part of it is giving the state primacy, if I'm correct here, primacy over the federal government and regulating carbon capture, carbon sequestration wells. This has the potential to affect us in certain areas. It's not going to affect everyone, but who owns the pore space that carbon will be stored in is something that we need to be aware of and make sure the bill addresses correctly. So we will be following this. I believe the bill is a version of one that's been passed in other states. So as always, we need to make sure that any legislation that comes down, do our darndest to make sure that it's not harmful to people who own oil and gas rights, or in that case, the pore space left after the gas is extracted. So that's all that I had to talk about today. I want to keep these weekly webcasts relatively brief, and next week you can expect some new topics. I want to thank you for joining me today. The same link will work each week. If that changes, you'll get a notice about that. The recording may be available. I have to take a look at that and see. And one last plug that I'll put in is please consider joining POGLA. That's the Pennsylvania Oil and Gas Landowner Alliance. We are an organization of people like you that own oil and gas rights, and we provide education and we advocate for your rights. Now, this presentation today was me as R&R Energy Consulting and the GasWellGuru. It does not represent the views of POGLA, but I certainly work with POGLA and would encourage you to join if you're not a member. This oil and gas business is a long game, and you should stick with it, plan for the long haul, and staying up to date on things is a good foot to put forward. So thank you for coming. I'm going to stay on for a bit. If anyone has any questions, I would take a few minutes to answer those. I don't see any. It's possible nobody figured out how to enter them. But if you look in the lower right-hand part of your screen, there should be a place to enter questions. So I'll stay on here for a few minutes and just quietly see if there's any questions.